Welcome to My Financial Coach Live.
Hello, Empo. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Arthur Laffer. I'm sure that you need no introduction, but for the people on the call, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, my goodness, yes. My name is Arthur Laffer. I'm an economist. I got my PhD at Stanford, undergraduate at Yale. I taught at the University of Chicago, USC, Pepperdine. I've been advisors to presidents and congressmen and senators and cabinet members for a long time. And I just love what I do, and I like supply-side economics. And to me, the key to economics is that incentives matter. Economics is all about incentives, and that's what economics is.
Well, Dr. Laffer, as someone who has earned the trust of some of the most important people in the United States and the world, can you let us know why it's so important for individuals, in fact, any individual, to have unbiased and clear advice when it comes to economics and finance?
Yeah, what you want to do is make the right decisions. And when you make the right decisions, you have to have the right inputs. You know, there's an old computer program, which is, we used to call it GIGO, G-I-G-O, which is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good objective evidence as well as good and objective advice, you're going to make bad decisions, and those bad decisions will cost you and cost you dearly. That's true in finance, that's true in life, that's true in politics. So you always want to have as good information as you possibly can, and as unbiased and as clear suggestive advice as well to make good decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, can you give us some anecdotes perhaps about some of the people that you've helped along the way, some of the conflicting advice that they may have gotten in the past, and how you kind of talked through and kind of delved into these very complex issues? I mean, you were part of I would say, the economic revival in the 80s, so there must have been a lot of differing advice rattling around during that time.
Well, let me give you one example. Now, this is just one. I'll give you two examples if you want in this. It's sort of fun. Now, with Reagan, with any politicians, I do not ever work for a politician. I did in 1970 to 72. I was the first chief economist at the OMB, which is White House. I was George Shultz's right-hand person, and I found out what I don't do well. I'm not a good government employee. But what I have done is I've been advisors to presidents and senators and congressmen, et cetera, and unpaid advisors, because once you're an employee, and that's when you've got to make your boss happy. But as long as you're an advisor and you're not paid, I mean, they can't fire you, they can't double your pay, they can't have your pay, and you give them what you think is right and what you hope is right, and you do the best you can. Now, an example of that is in 1982, the president had just passed the tax bill, which cut tax rates in the U.S. by about 25% across the board. All right, and the economy went into a major dip in the economy. It was like July or August of 1982. There was a bill coming up, and a lot of people were advising the President Reagan to get rid of the third year of the tax cuts. Now, we were in the Roosevelt room when President Reagan came up to me and said, "You know, Arthur, I just was talking to Marty Feldstein, who was the actual employee economist for the president, and he said he thinks we should get rid of the third year of the tax cut. And let me tell you what his logic was, if you can, and I'd like your comment on it. He said that if we get rid of the third year of the tax cut, there'll be smaller deficit next year than would have been. With a smaller deficit, there'll be less borrowing on the part of the government, which means that there'll be more funds available to the private sector, which means that interest rates will be lower. With lower interest rates and more funds available for the private sector, there'll be no more housing starts. There'll be more, the hurdle rate for investments will be lower. There'll be more investments. With more housing starts, with more investments, the economy will boom, and you'll have an increase in output going forward." Do you have any comments on that, Arthur? And I said, well, let me, if I can, for just a second, sir, see if I can restate what Marty said to you. What Marty said basically is that if you raise taxes on workers and producers, you're going to get more workers and producers. Did I get that right, sir? And the president smiled at me and clipped. He said, "Thank you," and walked away. And obviously, he didn't get rid of the third year of the tax cut. We had the biggest boom ever. I can remember another time was David Stockman. David Stockman hated me. And, you know, he came in, we were in the Roosevelt room again with the president, with Reagan, and David Stockman rolled out this scroll that maybe had, I don't know, 800 categories of tax categories, federal tax categories. They were 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, this year, next year, the year after, and the year after that. He had that with all the actual data filled in on all of these. He said, okay, Laffer, with your damn tax cuts, where are the revenues? I want you to sit down here and I want you to go through this and add your revenues. How in the hell are we going to get those revenues? And I just looked at him and I said, David, I'd rather be approximately correct than precisely wrong as you are every time you talk. And with that, the president roared and laughed, and we went on. The way you do it is by giving your objective advice, the way you think things will turn out. It's not that you won't be wrong from time to time. You will be. In fact, you'll be wrong a lot of times. But what you never want to do is bias the answer to please the client or please the president or please the politician. You want them to see exactly what you believe the consequences will be, and let them go from there. They were elected. The people you advise in the financial community, it's their money. It's not your money. But what you want to do is give them the best advice you possibly can, the best information you possibly can, to let them make the decisions, because they will bear the consequences. Whenever a decision maker is separated from the person who bears the consequences, you always risk misleading the person. So therefore, you always want to have the clear, best information you can to allow those people who bear the consequences the best available information to make good decisions.
Well, Dr. Laffer, thank you so much for that answer and for those anecdotes. I feel that when it comes to a decision maker coming up with not just solutions for themselves, but maybe for their family and for the country, it's important to get that objective advice. Before we let you off the line, I just want to ask, is it really true that Ronald Reagan's favorite jelly bean was the licorice jelly bean?
I thought you were going to say the green jelly bean, and that would have been terrible info. I mean, I don't really know that's true. I know mine is the black jelly bean. I like the licorice jelly bean a lot.
Interesting.
In the Roosevelt room there, he had this big jar. It must have been 1.5 feet high, maybe a foot in diameter, and filled with jelly beans. And he didn't eat them all that much, but every now and then all the rest of us would go in and dip our hands in there and grab them. I guess in the day of the coronavirus and stuff, you can't dip your hands in the jar and pull them out through that anymore. But it was just a fun story, a wonderful way. What a great man Reagan was. I mean, he was one of the finest people I've ever been with. I loved him dearly, and I've been working with him since the mid-'60s. And it was just a fantastic person to work with, and such a gentleman all the time, and damn good president. I mean, look at the prosperity we created. It was just great.
Well, Dr. Laffer, I'm sure that you are extremely busy right now, so I'm going to let you off the line, and we want to thank you on behalf of all the listeners of My Financial Coach Live that you took a little bit of time to speak with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm a little bit of a partner in that, My Financial Coach. So I love it. You guys do a great job.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Laffer.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bye now.